Hey everyone, in today's episode, I want to talk about the real history of sleep apnea. And the reason I emphasize that word in a really obnoxious fashion, and even italicized it over here, is because it's not what you think it is. Because we get told all the time that the only way to fix this is with a CPAP. This is what we've always done, and it's been on forever. Da, da. But here's the thing. What if I told you that a CPAP was literally first used in June of 1980? Okay, it's not really a long-standing thing in medicine. Okay, and I know modern medicine altogether really isn't that old, but when a CPAP is only 44 years old and you have so many people who hate it for a lot of valid reasons, claustrophobia, having dry itchy skin around your mouth, or having a dry mouth, or blowing air into your stomach and having gut discomfort from that, or just you use it and it doesn't work. Okay? It's like exercising but never losing weight, or being in shape. It's just incredibly frustrating. So that's why being able to understand the history of this allows you to see how we got here and be able to kind of back up to that fork in the road that modern medicine had a decision to go one way versus the other. Okay? And that's what I want to talk about here today. Okay? And you'll learn a lot of cool facts too. This will be a great dinner time discussion. Like, hey, honey, what'd you learn from the internet today? Okay? I assume that's what you like to talk about. So, first things first is Charles Dickens. What am I talking about here? So, sleep apnea, there's a certain time it wasn't even known as sleep apnea. Okay? It was called Pickwickian syndrome. Okay? And the reason Charles Dickens is involved in this, not just because I don't know, I really like to appeal to my literary audience here. But it's because that this was a character from called the Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, and essentially just a guy who was overweight. And before we get into like, oh my god, my weight's not causing my sleep apnea. Hold on, it's literally just a literary character. Okay, so just hold your seat. So, but it was a guy who was snoring at night, tired during the day, and so from this stereotype, okay, around 1918, Sir William Osler, who, if you were to look up the gentleman, Osler, Osler, or maybe you're from Louisiana and you know about Osler Hospital. But essentially, he's like the doctor's doctor back in the day. Like, that's who everyone was like, oh my God, learn from you, sort of deal. And he characterized this in, people who, were overweight, slightly overweight, and they were tired all the time and had a breathing pattern that was off. Okay. And back in the day, the early 1900s, they didn't have sleep studies, they didn't have aura rings. Someone would just sit in your house and kind of listen to you sleep, or kind of try to watch you by candlelight. Really creepy, but you can appreciate the dedication to someone's health and healing. Or it's just kind of creepy. But nonetheless, what they found was that in Pickwickian syndrome, uh, during the day, they would underbreathe. Okay, so let me pull this one up here. All right, from PubMed, NIH here. Uh, so essentially, they've called it hypoventilation syndrome during the day. Okay, of where they're not breathing sufficiently, kind of shallow, right? And at night, pull this up, it would switch into hyperventilation. Okay, how do these two modes exist at the same time? That's a great question. So, what happens is when you underventilate, you're not breathing enough, you will build up CO2. And then at night, your body wants to not have all that CO2, okay? And then it'll try to blow it off, okay? It'll try to hyperventilate, okay? Now, we'll get into why that's important in a moment. But the point being is that when they first started to observe people with this sort of phenotype, I mean, first they thought they were either narcoleptic or just flat out, really interesting things they wrote about people back in the day in medicine, just constitutional laziness, or I think it was like droopy is what they would call them. Yeah, droopsy. Very nice. Very nice and pleasant way to describe other human beings here. Very, very considerate. So essentially, they saw this overbreathing at night so much because again, They can't look into someone's throat. They didn't have pulse oximeters at night. They didn't have all that yet. Okay, we'll get into that timeline in a little bit. But what they found was that people were like over breathing at night a lot. And in fact, they actually thought it was a form of asthma, so much that they would refer to this as nocturnal or nighttime asthma. Okay, so pretty interesting when you start to think of it like, oh, this is how they started to see it. And in fact, if you were to look, or if you were to spend your time like I spend my time, you look up sleep apnea in PubMed here. This is where all scientific paper literature goes. And you go way back in time here, okay? Okay. Yeah, way, way back. You will find like we're in like what year am I in? Like 1958, you know. This is not even a long timeline. They're using Pickwickian, and they do use the word apnea, right, to describe the stoppage in breathing. Because what they would find is people would be overbreathing, hyperventilate, and then they would stop breathing, or apnea. Okay, but yet the term sleep apnea doesn't really exist until around here in the 70s. Okay, because they weren't able to really get a firm um, uh, analysis of breathing patterns there. And if you look at something like this, is like literally as early as it gets here. Okay, they call it again. They didn't introduce the word obstructive sleep apnea yet, but what they found is that if they hyperventilated people during sleep, then you would have apnea. Interesting. So at that point, when they were learning more and more, because let me pull this up here. Where's my nice little graphic? Did I not pull up my graphic? Here we go. Timeline. Okay. Let me zoom in here for you. All right. So this is the I mean really this is the sleep apnea timeline. This is not mine. They call it the CPAP timeline. Very CPAP centric. But as you see here in the 50s, that's when like Pickwickian syndrome was more of a common thing. Again, first documented in like the early 1900s because there was really nothing much more to do during the Depression, I guess. That was an awful history joke. But nonetheless, around the 60s, 70s, this is when they started to understand there was an obstruction of airways during sleep. So at this point in 1978, there was this guy is Canadian, and then somewhere in between, this Canadian worked with an Australian, and then an Australian developed what we know as a CPAP by testing it out on dogs and putting it on their snout to make sure they kept their open airways at night. The 70s and the 80s were a different time in research. But nonetheless, there is this period, 1978, where you see two big issues in this condition at night. There's overbreathing, okay? There's overbreathing over here, and then there is the stoppage in breathing. Now, if I could put myself in their shoes in the 80s and also be what seems to be French Canadian, if I put myself in their shoes or perhaps boots, I could see why I would go the direction of trying to prevent this stoppage in breathing or the apnea at night. It makes sense, right? Because that seems way more deadly than just overbreathing, right? So there was that fork in the road for modern medicine to go, well, do we focus on the overbreathing? Or do we try to make sure that people don't stop breathing? I think it was a reasonable decision. I'm not going to bash people and say like, "Oh, you're dumb," but like, it seems very reasonable at that time to do that, and that's how the treatment or the paradigm around sleep apnea was born, taking the let's stop the apnea path here. Okay, and that's why not on this timeline here, but really the first thing before a CPAP was getting pretty much a hole in your trachea so that if your upper airway did collapse, it didn't matter because you still had a hole down here. Okay, that was the 70s, folks. Okay, this was not medieval times that they did this. That was the 70s. Maybe you can consider the 70s medieval times, maybe not, I don't know. But point being, pretty rudimentary. And then the CPAP was the next thing from there. Came out of Australia. That's where ResMed is I guess was originated from, and then just spread all over the world here. Okay, now a multi-billion dollar company. Now, here's the thing though. When people either can't use the frickin' CPAP, or they do, and they're still tired. Whether it's CPAP, BiPAP, or APAP, they're using it, but they're still tired. But they're not having as much apnea as they had with it. So when we think about that fork in the road of modern medicine, do you think they went down the right path? Because they had two options: stop the blockages, right? Stop the apneas, or address the hyperventilation or overbreathing. Which path do you think is going to be more viable? Because we have 40 years in the books of CPAP only really working for 30-40% of people. Same thing for surgery, of where you literally cut out the obstructions to hopefully reduce the apneas. 30-40% success rate. Of these two paths, again, which one do you think the answer lies in? Okay? Want to go down the hyperventilation path? Stick with me. If not, you can stick around too, but we're going to talk about this hyperventilation. Because when we think about this, like not only the history of sleep apnea, but like your history of sleep apnea, okay, of where when we're looking at signs and symptoms of hyperventilation, right? And that could be even just yawning during the day, or something known as a high respiratory loop gain, which I know just sounds great, but again, great dinner time vernacular. Hey, honey, I learned about high respiratory loop gain today. Oh, tell me more. Okay. And what that means is just in response to certain activities, stairs, slight exercise, someone stressing you out, you'll start to breathe faster and faster. Okay. So if you're someone, again, like, again, top of the stairs, light exercise, any of that causes you to breathe heavier and heavier. Okay. Or you hear yourself breathing when you lay down at night, or you find yourself during the day just noticing yourself, oh, I'm breathing out of my mouth. Okay. And no, just nasal breathing is not going to fix everything. Okay. But just breathing out of your mouth, that's a sign that your body is in a pattern of overbreathing or hyperventilating. Okay. Not exactly great, because then that carries over into the night. Okay. Regardless of your BMI or your body weight. Okay. Because yes, in Pickwickian, there's a little bit more underbreathing, right? But that's really like, we're talking BMIs, like you're 50, 60, 80 pounds overweight. So for the majority of people, you're not explicitly having a lot of hypoventilation. You're still having hyperventilation during the day, okay? Which you'll see in those symptoms. Another way to check this is how long can you hold your breath? Because if you have a hyperventilation overbreathing drive, it's not going to be very long, okay? So you can follow along with me if you would like to, but essentially we're going to do something called like a relaxed pause here, okay? And this is a good way to assess, are you a overbreather, do you have an overbreathing drive, or you're normal, okay? So we're going to do a normal inhale and a normal exhale, and then you're going to pause breathing, okay? Let me see if I can get a timer here. Okay. Timer. Okay. This seems reliable. Oh, I'm going to verify them a human. Hope it pass. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So just that. Okay. All right. So we're going to do an inhale, exhale, and pause. And then you're going to pause until you feel the first urge to breathe. Okay. And I call it a relaxed pause because you should be able to take a relaxed inhale after this, not a like a just a normal, okay, or however you take a normal inhale. So normal inhale, normal exhale. Let's do this. Okay, I gotta do this again. I want a stopwatch. Sorry about that, my friends. That was a practice run. Normal inhale, normal exhale, pause. I'm going to talk while we do this, so this will skew my time. But essentially, the first urge you have to breathe is when you should note your time here. And it may feel like a sudden tug. It may feel like a burning discomfort building up and up and up. And at this point, very few of you should be over this. Okay? Now, most people, when they first start working with us, they're in the single digits. The very first time I did this, and I just took my first inhale, by the way, while talking, very first time I did this was 7 seconds. Okay. Pretty bad. Okay. Most people will be around there, definitely less than 15. If you're less than 15, it means you have a high overbreathing drive. Okay. That's what that means. And that is going to contribute to this. Now, the reason this happens is because when you think about the times you're breathing a lot in your life, okay? Because with this hyperventilation, it's chronic. You don't really notice it too much, but you think about the increases in ventilation. Again, like top of the stairs, right? Or exercise makes you breathe heavier and heavier and heavier. But also, it happens at night. Because when you stop breathing, what happens afterwards? You hyperventilate. And hyperventilation, think of it like if you're someone who you get stressed out a lot, right? What do you start to do when that stressor comes on? Breathe more and more, right? It's a pattern. It's a pattern that happens more and more and more and continues on in that fashion. Okay? It's like in fact, it's a neural pathway that then becomes activated all the time and just goes and goes and goes and goes. So that's why you get more triggered more easily to overbreathe. It's a bad pattern. So thus the way of fixing it, okay, because we really want to break down how easy it is to fix this, it's just a two-step process. The first step being breaking this pattern of overbreathing, okay? And just really how you do it. It's pretty simple. You just train yourself to underbreathe and you kind of get nice and Goldilocks in the middle there, okay? You want to be a normal breathing pattern, okay? That's thing one. But thing two is how else? What other things cause overbreathing? Because here's the thing. In a clinic, in a hospital, like you know what vital signs are, right? Blood pressure, okay? Like I'm pantomiming a blood pressure cup over here. Blood pressure, your pulse, temperature, and respiratory rate. How many times are you breathing in a minute? That's what we look at, right? And it could be asthma. It could be a panic attack. You could be in sepsis. You could be infected. You could have a pulmonary emboli. Okay? So, what does that mean when you have an elevated respiratory rate? Is it a problem by itself? Because, like in asthma, if we just get you to stop breathing, do we fix it? No. We had to give you like bronchodilators to fix the underlying issue. Okay? So, hyperventilation is a sign that there's things underneath. One of them we already talked about, the neural pattern in your brain, right? With your brain, your lungs, that starts to have this high respiratory loop gain, right? Everybody's favorite new phrase. But then the other piece is, well, what else is driving this? Okay. So with all those different conditions, right? Asthma, anemia, etc., there's a metabolic problem that then leads to this high respiratory rate, hyperventilation, overbreathing. So in your own life, there's probably very few like things you can point to, like, oh yeah, I had an asthma attack, and since then forever I've been overbreathing. No, that's not the case. The thing is, with these chronic issues, there are going to be little things that pile up that, like, sitting and thinking about now, you may not be able to identify. But when you think about, has your stress in life gone up over time? Yeah, probably has. Okay, we already talked about stress is something that can drive overbreathing. In terms of nutrition, has that always been like 100% spot on the last like 5 years or so? You can be honest, okay? No ill will if it hasn't been. Okay. Certain foods can drive inflammation to lead to overbreathing. Okay. What about, say, like you also experience where there's certain things in your environment? Like if you go into a city, someone's smoking a cigarette, what's that going to do for your ventilation rate? It's going to go up, right? But what if I told you there's things in your environment very like right now that are contributing to that? Okay, it may not be cigarette smoke. It may be some chemicals off like a, you know, off of your furniture or off of a pillow with a bunch of crap in it, right? Okay, like mold as that crap, not actual cat doo-doo, right? So with that, and then another thing, like in terms of routines, etc. Here, that's why being able to like recognize, okay, now there's all these lifestyle components that will then lead to metabolic um, pieces here. Now, how this all comes together is pretty simple. I'll draw it out real quick because we're gonna have something here in the middle. It's a circle for now, obviously. So we have stress. Come back, stress. Okay. Explain this in a second. And then we say environment here. These are going to be the biggest factors that all come in and determine metabolically what's going to be your drive to breathe. Because all of these things, okay, we talk about environment, nutrition, stress, circadian, this is just like your routines of life here. You're staying up a little bit late because, I don't know, kids are up in the middle of the night, whatever. Or maybe you're off to work early or you're just like on a constant go. You don't really have a good steady routine that's aligned with your body's rhythm. That's going to throw your circadian rhythm off. Okay. And all of this is going to converge on how your body takes in oxygen and expels CO2. Okay. At a cellular level, this is cellular respiration. Okay. This is what our body does at a tiny, microscopic, well, really nanoscopic scale. And it is linked up to how we take in oxygen and get rid of CO2 on a macroscopic scale. So it comes into the cellular issue here. All right. And that's really the fun, like, you can see why. When so many people are struggling with sleep apnea, when we're just trying to like blow in more air. But when we take the focus on hyperventilation, see where it takes us all the way down into the cell, into our neural pathways of how we breathe. That's how you're able to finally be free of this. Just a simple 1-2 step of step one, fix the breathing pattern. Step two, reduce inflammation. That's pretty much it. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of different intricacies in between. Don't get me wrong. It's not just like taking 1-2 steps up the stairs, right? But this is really the path available to people and why so many people, like, they come to us and like, wait, can you really fix this without a machine? Because that's all we've ever known. But when you know your history, right, the history of this condition, the history of how you've gone through this, right, like a little issue that was lingering and then suddenly it just became this pattern, you got stuck in it, right? Well, you got stuck in it because you got stuck in that breathing pattern. And it's been an issue building and building over years, but it now comes to a head when you have all these things. It's just a matter of addressing this and the breathing pattern. And that's what allows you to go from where you feel like every single day is this like massive push. You already like regret waking up the moment you open your eyes in the morning, and like all the things that were fulfilling in life, whether it's like job well done at work or having like hobbies in the evening or like being with people, all gone, right? But when you're able to be at that fork in the road, okay, and decide which path you're going to pursue. Is it, the conventional route that you may have already been on or have seen others? Maybe you just hate the idea of it. Or is it the route of the other problem of the hyperventilation and being able to really address that? Because the thing is, hyperventilation is also what leads to the blockage of breathing. Okay. And really simply, the physics on that, I know we talk about this a lot. It's the Bernoulli effect or Bernoulli's law. Essentially, like trying to drink a milkshake out of a paper straw. Okay, you have a lot of pressure in a tube, and it will cause this like suction on the walls and a collapse. Okay, so really, the hyperventilation is the apnea problem, and that's really the most important thing for as you're deciding which path do I want to go on. Okay, that's your decision here for today, because that's the history, that's the natural course in history, and it's just up to you what story you want to write for yourself going forward. Okay, so thanks so much for joining me in this. I hope you've learned a lot of fun and exciting things. You want to learn more fun and exciting things. We have our sleep apnea freedom series here. I mean, episode 1 will probably be very um, complementary to this. We're talking about how you really got sleep apnea here. Lots of other fun things in here for you to check out. And that is at ochnow.com/SA freedom. Okay, just type that, write it down, whatever works best for you. And if you're someone who, looking at that path, you want to be able to, go on the right path and be able to have as much confidence and certainty as possible that when you're on that path, you can get through it and have the guidance that you need. And you're someone who, like, again, really motivated, really knows, like, okay, I cannot keep living like this. I refuse to settle for this. Then where you can go is I'll pull up the link here, all these things here, ochnow.com/talk. Okay, this is our free one-on-one evaluation call where we just talk about your biggest issues, your goals, and figure out, okay, how can we help get you there? And if not, I'll be very straightforward. I'll say, hey, based on your needs, XYZ is going to be best for you. Okay. And when you go there, ochnow.com/talk, you will find, what will you find? You'll find our intake form here. Okay. It takes like a second to load, so don't like freak out when you just see like a loading bar. But you'll see this, just fill it out and you just pick a day and time and we will talk to you then. All right. So that is everything for today. So go wherever your heart leads you, whether that's more videos or speaking with us. All right. So thanks for watching and have a good one.